Boom, there you go. That was the trailer for Dark Ride, arriving from Image Comics and Skybound this week of new release. For to be exact, October 5th, available at your comic shops, your LCS. Support your local comic shop, as well as on Comixology, Amazon Kindle, Apple Books, Google Play, everywhere. And as you see on the screen, you know him, you see him, you recognize him, the writer extraordinaire, the creator of Dark Ride, Joshua Williamson. How are you, sir? I'm sorry,
good,
it's been a late night.
No, sorry, man. That was an awesome intro. Good job, dude. That was really good. That was really good.
That energy when you're excited about a project.
Yeah.
You know, we as creators, you know, the doldrums of marketing and press and pushing. I like to give a positive vibe because we put all this hard work into those projects, and we want to, entertain, inspire the people. So I give you what you deserve. So,
oh, thanks, man. I really appreciate that. Yeah. It is like that. I feel like, and this is one of those books where I feel like you have to be like obsessed with it in a way, right? And when you're obsessed with something, it can get intense. And so it's always nice to like, sometimes you're like, I'm in this office all day long, And so it's nice to not just celebrate like making stuff, just making cool comic books. It's nice to just get out there and, like celebrate this stuff a little bit.
Let's go. Exactly. So thank you for giving us some content. And because as of this recording, we are in October now. We're getting into that Halloween mode, one of my favorite times of the year, where I go all out in regards to decorating. My wife loves to do the Christmas stuff, but Halloween is my time. And this is a perfect way to kick off my Halloween.
Oh, man. What do you got? Well, hold on. Like, what do you got in front of your house right now? Like, what you set up? What's your stuff to decorate?
I had a convention this past weekend. When you're doing conventions and shows, it's kind of hard to find the time, but it will be decorated. What I need to get to be real with you is, I don't know if you've heard about that big skeleton that's at like Lowe's or whatever.
Oh yeah, dude. Yeah.
I need that. That's what I'm in the market for right now.
We have a right now. I can see on my office right now. We have like the 3 hitchhiking ghosts from Haunted Mansion. It's like a giant inflatable. We have one of those ones that's like a giant skeleton that hangs near our doorway. That when you walk past it, it like talks to you and like vibrates, whatever. Last year I went nuts. Like last year we had like so many inflatables. We had so much stuff done. This year we're kind of toning it down a little bit because we're getting some construction down in the house. But I have a whole plan for next year. Like, and this can go into the book stuff a bit, but like next year, once the remodel, the big remodel is done in the house, the backyard, I'm gonna do it up like crazy. And what we're gonna do is we'll make it so that people have to go through like part of the house or the side of the house, and then our backyard is gonna be like a crazy like Halloween inflatable graveyard kind of thing. So you have to go through that, and then you come around. Like I have a whole plan set up. We will get to that eventually. This year we're taking it. We're easing up a little bit. Like, I mean, last year we had so many inflatables out there. We had so much stuff going on, but it's because I love horror. I love horror. Same thing. I love this time of year, and that's what this book was, dude. It was like I've been trying, like I love doing horror comics. I did Nailbiter. I did Ghosted. So I'm always trying to find a way to do horror stuff. And the other thing that I'm always obsessed with, dude, is I've always been obsessed with amusement parks. Just always obsessed with it. And there's this thing where it's like way back in the day, they were going to do Haunted Mansion. Like it was always planned to be Haunted Mansion ride at Disneyland. And so they built the facade, but they never knew what was inside it. And they had a big sign out in front that was like, oh, eventually this will open, and what happened was Walt Disney died. And so when Walt Disney died, the people that were supposed to develop the Haunted Mansion ride, they started arguing. In the past, when there was an argument, Walt Disney would come in like the tiebreaker and be like, no, we're doing it like this. And so back then, there were these 2 guys, Mark Davis and Claude Coates. They had made like a bunch of rides for Disney. I think one of the biggest, most famous ones is obviously like Pirates of the Caribbean. But they had this big argument where Mark Davis was like, it has to be fun, family, and then you have Claude Coates who was like, no, this shit needs to be scary. Like, it's got to be really, really scary. And when you go back and you look at a lot of the older Disneyland rides, they always had like a hint of scary to it, but gradually they shaved that off, right? Because it became more and more family friendly. But with Haunted Mansion, it was this whole thing where it was like these 2 guys were just arguing all the time of like scary or fun. And they came to a compromise. If you ever go on the ride, the first half is scary, the second half is fun, funny, But then they had all the music going across this guy X Sentio who did all the music, and he basically like married it all together, right? So when you go on it now, it's this awesome experience. Because I've always been obsessed with this stuff, and that was one back then that I was like, yo, what if that guy won that argument? What if he won the argument? Like, what if he was like, no, this should be some scary, and then they made Disneyland scary? Like, what if they went out and they were like, no, it's just gonna be scary? And so I was always trying to figure this stuff out and game it, and like, again, I'm obsessed with amusement parks. So a few years ago, I finally landed on this idea of like, what if Walt Disney had sold his soul to the devil to make Disneyland? And so once you start playing around with those ideas, we're like, oh, okay. And then I started thinking like, oh, it's like a horror themed amusement park, and there's, but that means there's like stuff going on there. There's a mystery of what's actually happened in the park since then. So this park's been around for 50 years. Like, what crazy stuff has happened in this park? If it's basically haunted, but there's something even deeper to it. And so I wanted to do a book about that. And then after we were wrapping up Birthright, another book I did with Skybound, me and the artist, we were talking a lot. And it was like, all right, so after we finish up doing Birthright, which is a fantasy book that me and Andrei Bressan did like 50 issues of, we're like, all right, what's next? Okay, let's do a horror thing, because Andrei also loved horror too. So I was like, oh, I got a horror idea. So that's where we came up with Dark Ride, and it's been real fun. It's like a dream book for me. It's one of those things where I'm like, I don't care if anybody likes or doesn't like it. This book's for me. Like,
Hell
how it
yeah.
is sometimes, and it's just, you get that, like, again, you gotta be obsessed with it and just kind of putting yourself into that book. And yeah, man. So there's a lot going on in this comic book, but it's been really fun to put together.
Dude, I'm feeling the energy. It's resonating off of you. And
Thanks,
this
man.
is virtual, but it's coming off of you. I cannot wait to take this ride. And people, if you're not feeling this right now, Josh was just going off. Like,
Dude,
you can see the passion in it, man.
Yeah.
Like, it's exuding from you, brother.
Thanks, man. It was fun. Like last week, because when you're making comics, and like you were saying before, I do a lot of books for DC Comics. Like it is a lot. Like I make a lot of stuff for them. But my heart's always going to be with the creator-owned stuff, like I came up doing self-publishing, like, I mean, we would be at like Kinko's at like 4 a.m. just getting comics made, like mini books and sell at conventions and stuff. Like, I'm always going to be that person in a way, like just me and my buddies in our dorms making comics. Like, there's a part of me that's always going to be that person. And last week I was actually like going to do another interview thing, and right before I did it, I saw a truck come up to the house, and they were unloading so many boxes. And I was like, dude, what did I order? Like, what is that, And then I realized, like, oh, no, comic books. And I ran out there, cut the box open, and I got the first issue of Dark Ride. That's what it was. And man, dude, like, there's something really special. And this one in particular, because there's like the production on it is really high, Nice. Like, this is probably one of my like favorite things I've ever made is this book, and like getting it in my hands for the first time, and there's just something about it. Like, it sounds silly, like even the cardstock cover is real thick, so it adds something to it.
Yeah.
And it's oversized, right? So there's a lot going into it. But when I got it in my hands, I was like, oh man, I did it. It's funny because, like, I've made so many books at this point. I've made a lot of creator owned, a lot of DC, but there is something about like a number one that's yours, and just being able to have it in my hands and being like, all right, cool, like this is cool. I remember coming in here to this office, man, I don't know, dude, it was a while back, like 3 or 4 years ago, on a Saturday morning, watching a horror movie by myself, and all of a sudden being like, I gotta get to work, and coming here, typing up the first like 10 pages of it, and then now it took time, but now I have it in my hands, like, and it's just cool. It's cool to do like another horror comic. It's also, and this goes back to the thing I was saying before about the Haunted Mansion stuff. Like, the code that they cracked is the same code that I was trying to do here, where it's like, you can do it scary, but you can also make it fun, and so that's what, like, I'm always looking for that in horror, like, I'm a big Sam Raimi fan, you watch Evil Dead, Army of Darkness, and, there was the Ash versus Evil Dead, that show was dope. Yeah. So it's like, those things are always like, there's a bit of dark humor there too, That's always what I'm looking for when I'm watching horror or anything, even something like Scream movies, there's a bit of funness to it. I mean, you look at something like Nightmare on Elm Street, where, Freddy Krueger's funny, so it's like, I like that element of that mix of horror and humor, of black humor and fun. And so that's something I search for, like when I'm watching movies or TV shows, it's one of my favorite genres. And so that's what this one, I try to put that all in Dark Ride, is making sure that it's like, yeah, it's scary, and try to find those scary moments, but also to be funny and have some fun with it, a little tongue-in-cheek, a little black humor. Just put all that in there. And this first issue is mostly about this kid. It's his first day at work in the park, and he's obsessed with horror. He's obsessed with the park. But he starts picking up that, like, something is wrong with this place, but Yeah, I just try to make it fun and have a bunch of horror stuff going on.
Yo, everybody, if y'all are watching this, man, and you're not feeling this again, Josh, if you knew, we all know Josh's pedigree. He's been in this game a long time. He's been working on these IPs that we've known and loved. But just if y'all ain't feeling it like I'm feeling it, it's just resonating. When you, y'all know from me from the channel, I've been working on a bunch of different things, but there's something when it's special and near and dear to your heart, and it's exuding right now, Josh. So again, you're selling it. I don't like generally I chime with a bunch of questions when I'm doing interviews. I don't even need to. It's coming across without having to provoke that out of you as the guest. Y'all aren't you gonna feel this, man? Then I don't. Then you're. I don't know. You're at a loss, but I'm feeling it. Josh, man, this is amazing. I love all this. I need to hang with you, and I need to find out offline where you're at because I want to go to your house and experience this backyard that you're gonna do. This sounds amazing, man. My to add to that, my daughter's having me do the garage this year to add more.
Dude.
If you feel that, so I'm gonna add that element to that. Man, I'm just enjoying this ride right now. This dark ride. Everybody, again, dropping this week from Image and Skybound. Y'all know Joshua Williamson, but now he's found this niche, and there's nothing like it. And if you're not feeling what's coming through the screen right now, I don't know what to tell you right now. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, if you've ever checked out, like, I did this other book called Nailbiter. That one was a big one I did.
Hell yeah!
Yeah, that's one to check out. Like, if you like Nailbiter, if you like Birthright, I think you'll totally dig Dark Ride, dude.
Oh yeah.
Like, I mean, you know how it is. Like, when you're making this stuff, like, it's just, there's something special, dude. Like, when you're making these books and you can see stuff coming together, and then you finally have it in your hands, you're just like, hell yeah, dude. Like, again, like, I don't know. This was a lot of fun to put together. This was a fun book to do, dude. Yeah,
I love it, dude. I love you for this, man. I love when you can see that off of another creator, because then it just, I don't know, it's an energy exchange and it's a creative exchange from creator to creator in different ways. Like when you feel somebody just gets it and they're inspired, it's just like, you know, it's going to be amazing content. So I can't wait to dive into this. Is this going to be, are you planning it to be a long run? Or are you?
Yeah, I mean, it'll depend on the story.
Because you know how like people plan out arcs, 4 issues, graphic novel. What is somewhat the plan on this, or do you plan? A much deeper, longer story?
It's a longer story, yeah. Because even with, I mean, I don't know, maybe it's not as long as say Birthright or even Nailbiter, but you know, I have a big plan for what I want to do with it and for this world, because it's like a lot of world building went into this one. And I think the book, it definitely takes some twists and turns, man. Like you read issue 1, read issue 2, I think, 3 or 4. I always love doing like jump scares in comics, or like big time cliffhangers where you're like, oh shit, like that's the stuff that I really like. So especially like I think 2 has a good like oh shit ending. But I'm always trying to balance that out. But it always depends on the story, like I don't always want to set a number on things because you never know. Like I was thinking about how when Brubaker was doing stuff like, I can't remember if it was Fatale or he was either Fatale or he was doing Kill or Be Killed. But he was doing some stuff that was kind of horror-y. And he originally was like, oh, it's going to be this many issues. And it ended up being like double that once he started writing it. So you never know. Like, but for me, it's like, I know the stories I want to tell. I don't want to rush anything because you don't want to rush horror, right? You want that tension to build,
Oh, yeah.
So I'm not sure, dude. It's just going to depend. Like, it depends on the story. And then also Andrei, too. Like, like this book is hard to draw. Like, because there's stuff in here where it's like
a lot at him.
Yeah. Well, there's like a 2-page spread in issue 1 that is the whole like amusement park, so stuff like that. And like Andrei, I love him. He's never been to an amusement park in his life, so he was like, "What am I drawing?"
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's crazy.
He lives in Brazil. So we're actually gonna try to take him to one next year.
Okay.
But I just sent him like a shit ton of YouTube videos. I was like, "Here's this. I was showing him everything. Like, where are you at? Where are you at?
I'm in the Washington, D.C. area. So we have like Six Flags, King Dominion. There's a lot of amusement parks nearby.
Yeah. So, like it's an experience. And if you haven't had it, it's a little hard to like explain to somebody else,
Yeah.
So I had to like go through and give a bunch of videos because I grew up in California. So it was like going to Disneyland all the time. Like I would cut school to go to Disneyland. I'd go to Knott's Berry Farm, Universal. Like I was, and going to the Six Flags out there, Magic Mountain, a little further out, but I would go to that one too.
Yeah.
But all that stuff, it's hard to explain to somebody. Like, like the whole process of like, you're in line, you go through this, like, a lot of times you go through this experience before you even get to the ride. and then you're on the ride itself, you know, and like trying to explain all that of like, it isn't like you just walk up, get on the ride and go, you know, like there's a whole thing a lot of times. It's definitely like, it's an environment, it's an experience, you know, like just even
Totally.
walking around. I mean, that's even with Disneyland, like Disneyland is such a controlled environment. I find that to be
Yeah.
so fascinating. You know, like
Yes.
any Disney place, they got it on lockdown. But yeah, having to explain that to Andre, it was a lot of videos, a lot of like, this is what I mean, this is what this is. But
Yeah.
then with the experience stuff, like that's the stuff I thought about a lot with this book of like, how do you take all that, all those ideas and do like the horror version of it? You know, like
Yeah.
if you're ever at Disneyland and something goes wrong, security is there like that. And you're like, where did they come from? You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
But you know it's because there's like all the networks and the secret passages and all that stuff. They know that we don't even see. Like they, you know, I mean, the fact that Disneyland like controls the smell of Disneyland is so fascinating to me. You know, uh,
Yeah.
like they control every little bit of it, and I've always thought that was really interesting. And I say that from a person who loves Disneyland. Like, there's no mocking here; it's all love. You
Oh, of
know, it's
course.
but I just think it's interesting. Like, how do you take all that and put it in like a horror setting? You know,
Yeah.
and make it a mystery, and then also in some ways, like, the book is also about like what's even scary now because it's like there's a couple things throughout the book about one of the characters is trying to develop like a new thing to scare people, and he's like, what's even scary now, and the world's scary, this is scary, like we're also jaded, desensitized, like you watch a horror movie and you're like, oh, I've seen this, you know. So
Oh,
he's
yeah.
trying to figure that out too of like what's even scary now. So it's like that's also a running theme of it is this dude being like, I gotta come up with a way to scare people. How do I even do that now? And like
Yeah.
him trying to figure out, well, what's the way you started was scary to me. Like that's where you start at. And him having to kind of like he has this attitude of like, oh, I'm not afraid of anything. And it's like, are you though? Are you? Let's find out. Like, and so there's this kind of moving theme of that stuff. But yeah, this book it's real personal to me, and obviously, like I was saying, it's definitely about things that I'm obsessed with, but it's also a little about some personal stuff in there. And you
Hell
know,
yeah.
with Birthright was fantasy, but it was really about the family, and this is very similar, where it's about horror and the amusement park, but it's also about family. You know, it's like sibling rivalry and you know, not letting your parents down, all this stuff. Like it gets deep into like personal stuff, and then I'm like, oh, here's some scary shit. Like here's something that scares you at the same time. But we'll see. I don't know. Like I was looking at issue 2 today. Like I said, I have issue 1 right here, and I'm really proud of it. Just
That's
again, just holding it in my
wonderful.
hands is real
How
cool.
many are you into right now as of so like when is going to be dropping this week, y'all? How far are
And
you ahead right now?
me writing,
Yeah.
I've written the first 4, but I have the first 12 planned, so it's like pretty
Okay.
tight out. You know, I usually plan out. I plan out pretty far, but you know, like every once in a while when you're working on this stuff. So when I was on Nailbiter, and I have the same note here, but on Nailbiter, I always had this thing in my notebook where it was like every page, top I read a note to myself. It was like, "Where's the scary at?"
Yeah.
And sometimes on Nailbiter, we would be like into an issue, and then I would realize like this issue's not scary, and I had to like rewrite stuff. And a lot of times that meant like there's this thing of like it's a writing rule where every once in a while you have to stop and consider like what's the worst thing that could happen, like when you're writing, what's the worst thing that could happen, and you have to kind of take a step back and look at the story you're telling and being like, is the worst thing that could happen the thing that should happen right now? You know what I mean? Like, you got to kind of like when you're writing, you got to take a step back a little bit and look at it from that perspective of like, you know, what is the worst thing that could happen? What is something that will be shocking, but not something that feels like it comes out of nowhere, not something ridiculous, right? But you got to make it be like an organic thing of the story, but you need to consider it because it might be something that like takes you in a different direction that is awesome.
Yeah.
So when you're writing, like if you place landmarks for yourself, some of those landmarks might shift around, or you might find yourself on a different journey for a bit and then come back around to that landmark. But you gotta consider it, you know, like there's that whole phrase of like kill your darlings, you know, like every once in a while you might be like, man, I love this story I'm on, but what if this happened? You know,
Yeah.
you gotta talk about it a little bit. So I always try when I'm writing to create the landmarks and to create the little pieces, but you never know. Like it might be like, oh man, you know what, like this is cool and all, but what if this happened? And like, how would this character react to that? And what's the
Yeah.
actual emotions of the story? Because if you start going on that, you might find some stuff that you're like, oh, this is way better. Like why wouldn't you go that way? You
Yeah.
know, I look at like how Disney and Pixar and how they do a lot of their stories. And I'm not sure if you know this, but like the way they work is they make the movie. So what they do is they do this thing called animatics, where they basically They storyboard the whole movie. Then they do animatics of the storyboards where the writers or the animators do the voices. Don't hire actors yet. They just do that. Then they watch it. They watch the animatic of it. And then they throw that thing in the trash.
Very true.
And they make it again, again, and again. And like with comics, we don't really have that. We can't, like, we don't have that kind of time, you know, because a lot of times, especially with most comics, they're monthly. But, you know, you have to sometimes, when you're working on this. I mean, I'll say, like with Nailbiter, when I first started out on Nailbiter, what my original idea for Nailbiter versus what was in Nailbiter #1 are so different from each other, because I threw it away a couple times. Like, I'd be like, oh, this isn't working until I landed on what it is. And Darkrai is very similar to that. And then I was like, okay, this isn't working. And I figured out what was working. But once that ball's rolling, you know, you have to, there is an impulse to stay on the lane, you know, but you can tell sometimes, like, oh, this is going to get boring, you know, or it's just, I don't know how to explain it, but you just kind of, you can tell it maybe isn't landing, and you're like, well, this could happen. Like, this would make sense. Like, if this character did this right now, it may not be what I want them to do, but that's what they would do. And you're like, oh, I gotta go that direction. So whenever I'm writing this stuff, I create like a framework for what I want to do, but I try not to get so like, you know, boom, 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 here's what it is every time. You know, I try to give myself a little room to move, just because you might land on something that you're like, no, this is going to be way cooler if I go this direction with it. It'll be a better book for it, you know, a better story. He's got to be willing to do that, I guess, right? Like, you got to be able to figure it out. So I'm always trying to figure that stuff out, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, you know. But I have like one rule, really. If I say, I probably have many rules, but I think at the end of the day, like, you have to like it. Like, you have to like it, because if you don't like it, then that's all a mistake. You know, you know, if it's not something you would buy, you know, like, I was having this conversation with some people on Friday, and we were talking about ideas with editors on Friday, and we were talking about some ideas, and I was like, there's some ideas on the table are getting thrown around. I'm like, I don't care about that. Would you care about that? Like, if you sat down and read this as a comic and you got to that scene, like, take yourself out of the creation for a moment. Just think about yourself as a reader going to the comic shop on Wednesday. I worked at a comic book store. I worked at comic books all through high school, all through college. And there's a part of me that's still going to be that person at the counter, like, selling books, getting my comics, open up that box, you know, flipping through a book and going, oh shit, look at this. Like, you have to keep that in your head every once in a while, you know? So you have to ask, like, would you actually care about that if that happened? You know, or is it, you just think that it, you know, it's an interesting game to play, but that's the stuff with Darkrai. Like, I have it mapped out to where I want things to go. But even then, like, I had a map out for the first 4 issues, and I was like, oh no, this is way cooler if I do it like this. And so I changed it, you know, I tweaked something and later in one of the issues, just because I was like, oh no, I know how to, like, spice it up. That's the best way to put it. Like, spice it up. Yeah.
Dude, yo. All right, I'm gonna say it again, y'all. Again, Darkrai drops this week, y'all. I'm dropping this interview the same week that it's dropping. And if you're not feeling Joshua Williamson right now, something's wrong with y'all. But for me, as a fan of your work,
thanks, man.
You made me an even bigger fan right now.
That's awesome to hear. Thanks, man.
You know, and I'm not just saying it to say it. I honest to God, when people exude the energy and the love and passion for a project, you can feel it, and it shows, and it's written, and it's been stated all throughout this, man. I had the pleasure of going, actually, you were talking about Pixar and their creation process. They brought me out for Toy Story 4 and for Onward in the pre-pandemic days. And I saw, and because they kind of broke it down. We had these various sessions with them as they talk about the process, and shit, for me as a filmmaker, that was like going to heaven, you know.
Dude, I bet
how they do that. And the process that you were breaking down, I could see in the love that you had, and, you know, like, they didn't even need this was a project that you've always had in you, and now it's finally coming to fruition. And you love to see stuff like that, and you're showing it through just what you're saying. Again, man, this is truly a pleasure talking to you about this. I can't wait to see how this ride is going to go even further, and how you're going to dive into it more. Like, I want to ask more, but I don't want to give away stuff that, you know, you're still, again, it may change, because, you know, you may find another, you know, path this other way that's going to take you, but you feel this content, and this content is in you. So I think what I would like to ask is what, as a promo, since we're also in Halloween month, you know, what maybe inspired this journey a little bit. I'm sure like you know, some certain classic horror comics inspire this in a way, but also like what's some films with like some top fives that we can throw out people that helped inspire you. But without the numbering listing, what are just some inspos that helps pave the way for Dark Ride?
Like I was saying before, you know, Sam Raimi movies, Dario Argento movies. Like I love Deep Red and you know, Evil Dead and the original Nightmare on Elm Street, the first one. You know, what's a weird one I'm gonna throw at you? It's gonna be so super random, but it's when I was a kid, there was this VHS tape, and if you watch it, you know, you would die in like 5 days. But no, so there was
about the Ring?
no. So when I was a kid, there was a VHS tape, and it was this Disney like Halloween special. But what they did was they would take clips from all these different like Disney things that were scary. So it was like just a scene with the witch, just a scene with Maleficent, just a scene from like just different stuff, right? You know, it depended on what it was. Just a scene from Fantasia with the Night of Bald Mountain sequence. Like they always tell us stuff, right? And they compiled together in this basically like clip show of all these like horror things from different Disney movies and Disney cartoons from, you know, creation of Disney even to like the early 80s. And it was all narrated by the Magic Mirror, but they made it out like it felt like they were telling you this like cool narrative about villains, about horror, but putting it in this weird like Disney lens, but it was still really scary because it was only the horror parts. So it wouldn't be like the whole thing, it would just be like a snippet of it. And they spliced it all together, and that thing is always in my mind in some form or another. That's something that really inspired a lot of my thoughts on like I think why I associate Disney and horror so much, you know? And so that one, aside from any horror movies that are out there, like I love a lot of horror movies, and like right now it's October, so you know, we watch one a day kind of thing.
Yeah.
But that was the one that like it joined these two things together from the very beginning. So I think that's a big influence for sure.
Can you think of the name of it at all?
Dude, I can't remember what it's called.
I'm gonna seek that out.
You gotta find. I'll send it to you. I'll send it to you, and then we can hang out at a convention.
Sounds good. I will reach out. I'll hit you up, man. Joshua, this was truly a pleasure, man. Thank you. Exuded it. Generally, I have to provoke the stuff out of people. You gave it to me in spades. So I'm all set for this ride. Dark Ride, y'all. Dropping from Image Comics and Skybound this week. My man Joshua Williamson, truly a pleasure, brother. Awesome. I will put your links in the description below, y'all. Make sure you go cop the book, Comixology, everywhere comics are sold. Support your LCS. Shout out again to Skybound, my girl Shannon out there on the stream as well. That was Joshua Williamson, y'all. I'm Kuya P. This is Nerds Rule the World. Let's go on that dark ride.